Hello and welcome to the testing notebook for Bahrain. Day 1 has just finished, and the main story basically throughout the last 2 weeks was whether or not Red Bull would fix their issues, Renault would fix their issues that occurred in Jerez. Red Bull only managed to do 21 laps in total in Jerez, and to be fair, apart from really the Caterhams, only produced a lot of laps. Toro Rosso didn't do too well either at Jerez either. But today was the unveil of the Lotus E22, and it is quite a nice looking car. I like it. I think it's a nice looking car. I don't know what your opinion is on the car, but for me it looks like a very nice car. But basically, just circling then to today, so the main story was Red Bull, and it was a better day than they'd had in Jerez. They completed 14 laps, which was obviously, you know, near the total that they did in Jerez of 21. Still, but not the best compared to what teams lap-wise have done, and comparing Mercedes engine laps and Ferrari engine laps to Renault-powered cars, there is yet again a huge difference. So I don't think Renault have yet to fix their problems with their engine unit at the moment. The only problem really for Sebastian Vettel is that the car did stop with about 45 minutes to go, which seemed to be a bit of an overheating problem. There was a smell reported from other teams and journalists around the pit lane when the car broke back. There was a strong smell of something like it was burning. So maybe a few more overheating issues there. And Red Bull spent the first 5 hours of today's session, a team obviously who we thought if they had fixed their problems would go out and test. But you knew there was a few bugs because they spent the first 5 hours of an 8-hour test session in the garage. So they only went out for about 3 hours and then didn't do too much action in that 3 hours, to be fair. And Toro Rosso, also another Renault engine, didn't do too well at all today. They had an oil leak at the beginning of the session, and that limited them to only 5 laps today. So they are hoping for a better day 2 tomorrow. Turning over Grosjean and Logier again, you know, they did do a few laps. They went out early, but only 7 laps really completed from Grosjean. So it's not for Renault. It's not really the best. What can you do? And how can they progress? The only team that really did anything for Renault was Caterham, to completing 63 laps. So Caterham obviously had a package or a way of, you know, stopping the package from breaking really, or having any issues. 63 laps is by far the most, one of the highest actually for engines mileage laps completed today. But still not as high as the Mercedes or Ferraris, but at least they're getting there. But with Lotus, Toro Rosso and Red Bull, you know, what can Renault learn when you've got Mercedes and Ferrari having Sauber, Ferrari, Mercedes having Williams, Force India, and themselves to learn from? And how can Renault learn from their mistakes if they're not getting any mileage and not getting any data? That's the problem I think Renault have. They're just not getting the data to fix the problems, whereas Mercedes and Ferrari are just getting data, and therefore they're going to progress, and Renault could be left behind. So that could be interesting. If you want to take anything out of today's session, that could be interesting to see if Renault and the Renault powers at the start of the season actually are behind the Ferrari and the Mercedes packages, which will be interesting to see into Melbourne. But going into today's action, so we saw 4 red flags today. First came right at the beginning of the session from Fernando Alonso stopping on track. Second was from Robin Frins in the Caterham, also stopping on track. Everybody stopped on track. And Danny Fiat was the third one. And then, as I said before, Sebastian Vettel caused the last red flag of the day. Times, yep, still pretty irrelevant at this stage, but Nico Hülkenberg was a full second a lap quicker than Fernando Alonso. He did a 1 minute 36.8, completing 73 laps. Alonso, as I said, was second with 1:37.8, completing 63 laps. Lewis Hamilton was third, 1 minute 37.9, 74 laps completed. Magnussen was fourth with 1 minute 38.2, and he did 79 laps, the second most laps of anyone today. Sebastian Vettel was 5th fastest with 1 minute 40.2, completing, as I said, 14 laps. Adrian Sutil was 6th with 1 minute 40.4, did 81 laps, and he was the person who did the most laps of anybody. And Robin Frins was 7th with 1 1 minute 42.5, completing 67 laps. Fiat was in 8th with a 1 minute 44.3, and he did only 5 laps. And Grosjean did a 1 minute 44.8, completing 8 laps. And Massa and Bianchi did not complete or did not set an official lap time. They completed 5 and 3 laps apiece. So what we have to still remember, though, is still early days. You know, we're still expecting teams, obviously, to produce probably over 100 laps over the next coming days. As pace-wise, they're about 3.5 seconds off what drive teams did last year in practice 1. I think it was a 1 minute 33.4 set by Felipe Massa in practice 1 last year. They're about 3 seconds away from it at the moment. That time probably could come down. So they're about where we'd expect it to be pace-wise on where we thought the new engine would be. So they're a couple of seconds off, but they think that gap will eventually be bridged and then get closer and closer to the 2013 times. Obviously, qualifying spec mode last season, they were going at least 2 seconds quicker than the practice 1 times, but you know, this is only practice, so probably a testing session is equivalent to about practice 1 session. So we're guessing or estimating, you could say, about 3.5 seconds off the pace at the moment. But that is basically it for today's testing notebook. Not much more to do. Williams, more information will be on our website. We have a new website out, www.f1breakdown.co.uk. It's been new and improved. If you haven't seen it yet, please, there'll be a link in the description, and there'll be just more news to back up this podcast and back up this notebook on our website later today, with all the problem people had, Williams and Marussia. You're not yet to say what their problem is, unless, you know, I'm not assuming, unless it was their power packs, which was Mercedes and Ferrari, which may not say they're as reliable as we think they are. But, you know, the whole question, I think, on what will be the main media story of this Bahrain test will be if Red Bull can go over 50 laps in maybe 1 day, or will they not even go over 50 laps in 4 days? That is what I reckon most people are expecting. But that is all that's left for me to say in this podcast. Join me tomorrow for day 2 of the Bahrain testing notebook, and from that, please remember to like, favourite and subscribe to F1 Breakdown, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.